So I want to say hello, and I want to also say thank you to the Kathy and John Howe Art Enrichment Program, which allows us to do educational programming here with University Museums. This is connected to the John Buck exhibition that we have right now in the Brunnier Art Museum, which includes one from our collection, but the rest from the Jordan Schnitzer Family Foundation's collections. And there's some really amazing prints, and I had a good conversation with some kids today about how wild some of them are, or the things you can find in them. So if you haven't been, I really hope you can come over to the Brunnier. They'll be open through December 18th. And I want to say thank you to Cole and Josh, and I'll give them a little intro from Highpoint Center for Printmaking in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you for being here and for talking about what you guys do. Cole Rogers is the artistic director and master printer at Highpoint, and he's the co-founder of Highpoint. And he earned his BFA in printmaking and art history minor at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, an MFA in printmaking at Ohio State University, and a Tamarind Master Printer Certificate from the University of New Mexico. He's worked at Tamarind as a senior printer, Vermilion Editions, LTD as chief lithographer, and was the print shop director at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, if you're wondering how we got to the cold weather. Along with Carla McGrath, Cole co-founded Highpoint Center for Printmaking in 2001. And then Josh Bindewald as the director for artist programs. And Josh, he has been with Highpoint since 2012. He coordinates the artist programs, including McKnight Fellowship for Printmakers, Jerome Early Career Printmakers Residency, the Full Color Print Program, and the Artist Cooperative Print Shop. He also manages the Studio Internship Program, coordinates adult classes and individual printmaking instruction, and is part of the exhibition planning team. And he has a BFA from the University of Wisconsin-Stout and an MFA from Bradley University. Both degrees have a printmaking emphasis. And this Highpoint Center for Printmaking is a really wonderful opportunity to see prints and printmaking firsthand, both at a high level artistic, kind of what you would consider an artistic printmaker, where artists come and they work with printers, master printers, to create prints, but also community outreach and a lot of engagement with the people of Minneapolis to figure out how to make prints and to reach out to that community and build kind of a rapport with the community. And then also you've got artists that are coming and doing residence and fellowships, and it does a lot of things that are really wonderful for both Minneapolis and for arts and the printmaking arts in general. And so we are really appreciative that you're here, and you're only 3 hours away from Ames. If you go right up 35, you don't even have to get off the highway, which is amazing to me. But it's an accessible place. So I want you guys to go ahead and talk all about what you do, and hopefully get some new friends that will come up and visit you after this.
Well, I'll say, Cole, before you kind of launch into the origin story of Highpoint, speaking of coming to visit, it's the weekend of October 15th, which I believe is just next weekend. We're having one of our free ink days, which we do 3 times a year, and those are a lot of fun. So if you decide you want to come up and check out the exhibition that's currently on view and visit Highpoint, you could also have the opportunity to get a quick lesson in a form of printmaking and spend the afternoon making prints. And we'll have some pictures in our slideshow of free ink days that have taken place.
Yeah, well, thank you, Josh. And I must mention that Free Ink Day is completely free, as the name implies, and there are no reservations. And we usually have a few hundred people that come, and it's pretty emblematic of our intent to engage the community. Printmaking was originally a very democratic art form. In its earliest days, it was a way of disseminating images and ideas. Largely, I mean, in the days when most manuscripts were written, the ability to make multiple impressions that would go out and disseminate information and images was a very powerful medium. And as things have progressed, now that could be the internet, that could be many other art forms, but printmaking remains a very, very vital means of expression. And we really try and make sure that the public is reminded of that. Many of us grew up making, whether or not it's potato prints, linoleum block prints or whatever, It's a very elemental and easy way of understanding transferring information from one surface to the other. And in our range of programming, we try and go anywhere from the very, very first time that someone ever gets a chance to see the impression of something they've carved or worked on, to very high level artistic work, which goes into museums. And that's been really the basis of our interest, is in involving as much of the community, no matter if they just want to come in and see an exhibition, if they want to take a class that's a couple of hours long to know something, or actually delve into it. And our programming is very, very broad. And Josh is going to kind of walk you through some of it, but very much the whole reason that we started Highpoint was to engage the community and give people a chance to, at times, move away from the digital, move away from having to go to YouTube to figure out how to do something, and really put the creative potential in the individual's hands.
So Highpoint was founded in 2001, and I guess before I even go a little bit to our humble beginnings, I'll outline the way this talk is going to proceed. Adrian said that of particular interest to the audience would be, of course, an overview of Highpoint, who we are, what we do, and then a little bit of emphasis on our community programming, as well as our artistic publications. So what I'm going to do is walk you through Highpoint, basically through a slideshow of a physical sort of digital orientation to the space. We have 4 areas of programming. So these are our humble beginnings. In 2001, Cole was, as Adrian said, one of Highpoint's co-founders, and perhaps in the Q&A he can talk more about the reasons behind the founding of Highpoint. But we were in this humble little space that we rented, actually just about not even quite a mile from where we currently are. And in the middle of a recession in 2008, we had kind of outgrown the space. This experiment that Cole and Carla started was actually doing quite well. There was demand for it, and the programming was taking off. And so, again, in the middle of the recession, they started a capital campaign in order to find what we referred to then as a permanent home. And that's where we are currently. So this is the building as we purchased it in 2008. Believe it or not, it was a 10,000 square foot comic book store that had been there for probably decades and was pretty derelict. So we came on, worked with an architect, and gutted the space to the studs and to dirt floors to basically recreate what Highpoint is today, the big white building on Lake Street. And we have 4 areas of programming. We have a gallery space, which showcases work from each of the other 3 areas of programming, as well as some other exhibitions that we feature, be it a juried exhibition, which is currently on view, an international exhibition. Occasionally we'll work with other curators to bring in work, but basically we average about 6 to 7 shows annually. And we have an artist cooperative space. So the artist cooperative space is one of the, I love to tell people that, like, this is probably one of the primary reasons the idea for Highpoint was generated. And that was Cole came from academia. He was in charge of the print shop at MCAD when he and Carla had the idea for Highpoint. And he was noticing many of his students, you know, would take print classes and fall in love with the art form, and then leave the institution and not have anywhere to practice it any longer. If any of you are printmakers, you know that this equipment, like you see in the foreground, is not only cost prohibitive for an individual artist to acquire, but it's also spatially prohibitive. It takes up a lot of space. So in order to not only get the equipment needed to ply your trade as a printmaker, but also the space to house it can be quite an undertaking. So the cooperative model is well suited for a print shop. And this is kind of the view walking into our print shop from the front door. It's of the 10,000 square feet in Highpoint. It has the largest footprint. What the heck is going on? My slides went advanced. This is a view from another area, and it's fully equipped to support each of the traditional printmaking processes and then some. As you can see in the foreground here, underneath that metal table are lithographic stones. And for those of you who know something about printmaking, those are something that is really cumbersome if you don't want it, but if you want to do a lithograph, it's really nice to have. So we have a library of lithographic stones that our members can use, as well as all the presses necessary for intaglio printmaking, relief printmaking, lithographic printmaking, monoprinting, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully I'm not throwing too many, unfamiliar terms at you, but all this is to say that we're just fully equipped to support basically any form of printmaking that you'd be exposed to as a student, or possibly even through self-taught means. And this is our screen printing area. Screen printing is actually the most popular technique practiced at Highpoint currently. Of our 70 or so members, I'd say at least half of them do screen printing regularly. It's gotten to the point where storage for those screens that each of our members has become a bit of an issue. And I should back up for a moment. I mentioned that we have approximately 70 artist members in the cooperative, and it functions much like a gym membership. Our members pay a monthly fee and are given an electronic key card, and they have access to the space to make their own prints virtually every day from 8 a.m. until midnight. And they have to kind of prove that they know how to practice the particular technical art form that they want to do at Highpoint, because unlike a student shop or certain other shops, we don't have monitors. So our members come and go when it works with their schedule. And so we need to be able to vet them to ensure that they can use the space safely while also using it independently. And finally, this is our dark room, which is a pretty cramped spot in Highpoint. It's a little hard to photograph, but it's not a dark room in the sense of traditional black and white photography, but we do have some photo-based processes like screen printing on the left and photolithography on the right. So again, this goes back to, we basically are well equipped to provide the necessary means for every art form that our members want to practice. And here's a couple shots of people actually using the studio. And another area of programming, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, is our gallery programming. So this view right here is from the co-op toward our back door. It's a storage space for co-op members. You can see all the flat files. It's also a space where they can use a light table or prepare paper. But you can see that there's artwork being displayed on the walls, and that's also an exhibition space. So it's kind of a spot where one co-op member at a time can propose sort of a mini solo show. And with our help, we can install that for them. And those rotate approximately every 3 months. And our members really appreciate the opportunity to not only show in our main gallery in the semi-annual member shows, but also to put something together that's entirely their own in this back space. This is another gallery space, which we call the print study room, which is just off the main gallery. And it's kind of like a presentation space meant to highlight the work that Highpoint Editions publishes, which Cole is going to talk about quite a bit more in a little bit. But you can see the framed work on the walls, as well as the large number of flat files. So that's basically where recent work that we've published tends to be showcased. And then in those flat files is where the majority of what you would call the inventory of each of those editions prints is kept. And here's another view. So not only do we have the flat files, but we have this really slick kind of rolling rack system where we can show our framed artwork. And I guess it does kind of, the way that this came about kind of contributes to community building a little bit. Cole had a relationship with somebody who teaches welding at a local college here. And when we were building out this space in around 2009, 2010, we collaborated with that welding teacher and his students to basically have them create a project to spec. So it was kind of like a learning opportunity for them to actually weld a product that is going to be given to a client, but it was advantageous for us because we didn't have to pay them nearly what you would pay if we were going to hire a welder, just to do it outright. And then this is our main gallery space. So this is Cole and I and our gallery director, Sarah, with a group of artists who recently had a show here this summer, a group of artists from Oaxaca, Mexico. And our gallery space is really quite something. As you saw from the exterior, we have those huge windows that overlook Lake Street. And Lake Street is an extremely busy thoroughfare in Minneapolis. So our space is really visible. Those two windows look onto the part of the gallery that you see here. This is another view of the gallery, kind of a panoramic view of an exhibition that we had. Another view, this one's basically looking at the gallery space from the windows. And as I said earlier, our gallery space showcases work not only from each of our areas within Highpoint, but also we reach out, we go beyond our walls to showcase work as well, periodically. And this is the windowless room of the gallery that you couldn't see in any of the earlier pictures. This is an example of some community programming, a curator giving a talk during an exhibition at Highpoint. And then we have our classroom. So I've talked about the co-op, I've talked about the gallery. The classroom is the third area of programming that I'm going to talk about. And it was recently named after our co-founder, Carla McGrath. When she retired, we named the classroom in her honor. And what's really nice about our classroom is at our old space, Highpoint Editions, as well as the co-op members, had to share space with the classroom. So our co-op members were limited when they could actually use the space to work on their art. When we built out this space, we were able to separate them. Not for the purpose of like establishing a hierarchy, rather to let them coexist without interference of one another. So our classroom has two presses, screen printing tables, which my colleague Tyler is doing in this photo, can basically support everything that our co-op can in some capacity. And the classroom is one of my favorite things to talk about at Highpoint because as far as community building, I mean, it's kind of a pole star to that effect. We, pre-pandemic anyway, serve annually around 5,000 students of all ages, everything from, very young all the way to the elderly. But I'd say the sweet spot is probably primarily like 2nd to 5th grade. And as a nonprofit, we're able to subsidize the cost of many of their visits through grants and donor funding that we can kind of redistribute. And then I just wanted to show you the exterior because frankly, personally, I'm pretty proud of it. We have a lot of gardening going on back there. So, in an urban area, everything's paved, right? Well, when we built out Highpoint, we made sure to set aside some of that paved area for rain gardens. So it's entirely planted with native plants, and it enables all of the water that's collected on our roof as well as our parking lot to be redirected to these plantings and allowed to infiltrate into the ground on site rather than being directed through a storm drain. It's basically a stormwater management best practice. And the classroom does a lot of programming in relation to pollinators and native plants and water quality as well. So it's kind of this synchronous relationship. And so now on to community programming. At any point, Cole, feel free to jump in here, but I always like to, when talking about Highpoint community programming, talk about free ink days, which I mentioned earlier on. And those are something we do 3 times annually, where we basically reconfigure that co-op space, which you saw a little bit ago, so that it is wide open, maximum workspace for as many people as we can possibly accommodate to come in and get a quick bare bones lesson in a basic printing technique. And then they get to spend the afternoon making prints. It's very family oriented. It's, I would say, kind of geared toward kids, but as you can see, the adults in these pictures are having quite a bit of fun as well. Sometimes it's actually harder to get the adults to leave than it is the children that are making the prints. And another partnership that we do, which is awesome, at the free ink day that we do in the summer, we typically have a puppet show as well. So we'll set up chairs in the gallery and hire this local puppet theater company to come in and do a little performance. And it's seen it several times, and I wouldn't say that I was a fan of puppetry, nor did I know anything about puppetry before seeing that, but I left convinced and a believer after seeing it. It was absolutely wonderful. And this is our most recent free ink day, which we did outside in the parking lot, and kind of made an even bigger deal out of it. You'll see people eating ice cream, so we hired out somebody to bring a little portable ice cream serving thing there. And this woman is, she had a bee colony with her, so she was educating our visitors about bees, frankly, and the role of pollination in our natural world. And there you see some more ice cream and people making prints. Another form of community building we do is we'll often have, education is very much at the heart of what we do across all of our programming. So this is a group of people that were there, must have been a tour of some kind, and we did a printing demo for them. In this image, they're actually printing part of one of Delita Martin's prints, which you'll see a little bit when Cole talks about some of the specific publishing projects. Which brings me to the publishing projects. So what we often refer to in-house as the professional print shop, Highpoint Editions, that's what you see here. This is basically another fully equipped print shop that is slightly separate from the co-op, again, not to establish some sort of hierarchical importance, but rather it enables them to work on projects without interfering with our co-op members working on projects. And to emphasize the fact that this is, no more or less important to the organization than the co-op, you'll see in the background there, that kind of big wide opening. Those are double doors that open onto our co-op, as well as a window that looks into the screen printing area of the, looks into the screen printing area of the co-op. And we also have some windows you may have seen in an early slide that look from another direction into Highpoint Editions. It is very much not a sort of elitist separation, but rather we try to be very approachable and educate our viewers. We whenever possible, make it accessible for them to kind of peek in, see what's going on, and hopefully learn something, walk away from Highpoint knowing more than what they knew when they came in. And now I'm going to mostly turn it over to Cole, because this is kind of his wheelhouse. I mean, everything's Cole's wheelhouse, if I'm being honest. He's one of the founders. His handprints are all over everything you've seen to this point. But Cole is our master printer, so he's kind of the first person that collaborates with the artists. And the first artist that he's going to talk about is Julie Meritu. And Cole, whenever you want me to advance or go back, you just say so.
Sure. Well, thank you. It's you've done such a wonderful job of bringing us up to this point, and I think you've just done a wonderful job of expressing the ethos of what we're trying to do at High Point, and it's breaking down barriers. And printmaking can become a little bit, and what we do in the professional shop is at such a high level, it's a little hard for some people to associate with. And we really need to continue to break down those barriers and go back to fundamentals where people realize that printmaking is, I keep saying it over and over, about transferring information from one surface to another, whether it's a handprint, a footprint, whatever. And High Point hopefully has got a very holistic approach, going from the ultimate novice to someone like Julie Meritou. Julie Meritou is considered one of the 100 most influential people, according to Time magazine, 2 years ago. And she's a MacArthur Genius Grant Award winner and has had multiple museum shows. And Julie, we've had a wonderful relationship with for over 20 years. This is the first print that we published with Julie. Julie is originally from Ethiopia. I believe she was born in 1970. She is an incredibly intelligent, wonderful artist. Yeah, this print we made with her in 2003. The previous prints were made last year. In fact, the last one we just got back from signing. Go ahead and advance. Let's see what's next, Josh. Yep. So a lot of people think that what we do is reproduce work. We do not make facsimiles of work. Julie and I on the left are in her studio looking at something that's a thought, and you can see the piece on the right, and that's where we ended up. Any artist that comes in the studio is not going to be doing something they knew before. It's very much so a process of discovery. Let's see what's next, Josh. This is another print by Julie. It's using a technique called chine-collé. It's a ancient Chinese scroll mounting technique, which was actually named by the French chine-collé. There are 3 layers of paper here that I'm applying wheat starch to. It will eventually be transferred to a sheet of paper. And okay, and this is proofing. Proofing Julie's print. As you can see on the right, there are 2 prints. Zach Adams Bliss, who is our senior printer, is inspecting to make sure that the 2 prints are identical. They look a little bit different here because of the lighting, but as we go through the process, we're layering pieces on top of each other and finding out what the end result's going to be. Because once again, we're not reproducing, we're actually working with Julie. She makes a drawing, we work on it, we print it, and she responds to that. Let's go ahead.
One thing which may be of interest that I want to throw out here is this is indicative of the level of scrutiny that that they have to go through. Like Zach inspecting those prints is it's quite something how fastidious you guys are.
Well,
they basically all have to be indistinguishable from one another, whether it's 10 prints or 40 prints. The idea of you as a printer, Cole, is that number 1 should look exactly like number 40, right?
Yes, and I do like vary a little bit in that we say that Each print is not exactly identical, because if you put them exactly together, you might find some tiny flaw. They are hand printed, but if you take two of them, put them on separate walls, you look at one, you look back at the other, it's indistinguishable. And each print, as in each artist, has very important features. Someone might need incredibly clean lines, straight edges. Someone else, the colors. We really try and stay as close to the artist's needs and desires, because it's really easy in my mind that a lot of studios have a look and they really shoehorn each artist into that particular studio's style. And hopefully, if you see a show of our work, that each one is distinct and different. If you see behind the screen printing table on the wall is something that is on the left. It's a print by Rob Fisher. The qualities of that print are very, very different from the qualities that you'd find in Julie's. And each one is super important that it works to that artist's needs. Here we are in Julie's studio for the signing of her print.
Whoops. I'll go back just
Sure.
so they can see the prints again.
Yep.
The way I ordered the slideshow, I was showing the finished work at the beginning and then the process shots. I'm not sure that was the best way to do it, but
that works. That works. But the print on the left was closest to her original idea. But in proofing, she tried different variations. The print on the far right is very similar, but a lot of the colors are inverted and changed. And while she liked that for different reasons, she decided to do an edition of that work. And the work in the center is a 3-color black and white lithographic print that came from the production. So each one is very similar in some ways, but came from the working process and became working proofs and eventually editions of their own merit. Okay.
I'm gonna go to Willie now. Okay, Cole?
Yep. Willie Cole was an artist I approached, and he was very busy, and it took almost 9 years to get him in the studio, but he was very prolific. We did probably 40 different editions, no, almost 50 editions with him. These pieces, the ironing boards, are printed directly from flattened ironing boards. They are, well, Willie's grandmother was a domestic worker who took in laundry from white people to support the family. And the ironing board and irons were very important iconographically for his work. And these were printed directly from ironing boards that were hammered, distressed, and flattened. There's another view.
There's some pictures of the actual.
Yep. So that's Willie on the left. And that's a good example. When we were cutting out the brown paper, we had a particular idea that we chased down, and it didn't work. Art is not something that is entirely linear, and a lot of it's about research and finding out something that you didn't know when you walked into the studio in the morning. And that's something important for us, that while we want to make editions that go out into the world, that we don't pressure the artist to reproduce work or define something too early. Hopefully, when our artists end up with work made at Highpoint, it's something that goes forward in their career and is new. Zach Adams Bliss inking up one of the ironing boards. And
Oops.
oh, and Willie signing one of the pieces just before his show.
Yeah, you can see the the frames in the background. The work was literally being screwed into the frames to go onto the walls right afterward.
Yep.
And now we'll do Diani Whitehawk.
Yeah, Diani was a wonderful project. Diani Whitehawk came in, and early on, actually, let's scroll through. I think we'll find another picture. Yep. So the initial ideas are on the right, and Diani's kind of working through some ideas on the left, which ultimately generated the pieces that you just saw. And they're based on traditional Lakota dresses with dentalium shells. And the dresses are made out of felt. And let's see what other photos we've got. So this is an early small, an early small test. A lot of times we're doing something on a small scale to try and figure out what works for an artist or not. We've got ideas, but we're not absolutely sure what the final piece is going to be. And that's a part of creativity. And the next. And so Diani is actually applying some ideas to the prints there. She's kind of doing some collage work. Let's see, do we have another photo? That's a final. But what Diani was doing was actually collaging things. So we try and keep the process open and flexible so that the artist is continuously being able to find their way without being hindered by figuring out things too early. And she's signing the edition there. Delita Martin from Houston, Texas. These are called keepsakes. The background patterns were developed by Delita. The drawings of the women are her in the center. The person on the left is her studio manager. The person on, person on the right is her studio manager. Person on the left is cousin. And over that, that's her doing the drawings. Go ahead. That's her doing the drawing on a stone in our studio. That was printed, and then let's see what our next slide is. Oh, so there it is, being the drawing is being processed on the stone for printing. And let's go to the next. And if you see to her right in this slide on the left is a christening dress, an antique christening dress she collected. Those were made into colograph plates using glue so that we could print. And the plate that was resulting from that particular, there she is. She's gluing it down using gel medium. Let's see what our next slide is.
I think that's it.
Okay, so back up one slide. So what Delita and I are looking at on the right is a print from that dress. So the dress was glued down to a plate using glue, and it was then, once it was dry, it was inked up and printed on the sheet of paper, resulting in the dress on the right.
And that was in an earlier shot too, as I kind of mentioned at the time, you were printing that as a demo for a tour group that came through.
Yes.
Cool.
And that's so important, is that we really want the public to come in and get involved and demystify and become engaged. And that's, Josh mentioned that I had been in academia and I felt a little bit cloistered away. With printmaking being such a democratic art form, it seemed really important that we return it to its roots, to the average person.
And I think you said it well early on, that we do everything from the person who's going to come in, who's never picked up a brayer in their life and is going to, spend 45 minutes maybe hammering out some prints, all the way to someone like Julie Meritou, who's, at the top of the marketability spectrum. Cole, something I realized I forgot to mention that is probably worth mentioning is spelling out explicitly what publishing is. We've been using that word a lot, and I find it can be often confusing for people when we say print publishing with artists. Would you tell them?
Yeah, I'll try and be quick.
that?
We got 15 minutes left. We'll leave some Q&A, but publishing comes from the practice when at one point there would be someone who would fund an artist to make prints with a printer. The prints would be made and distributed. Daumier, Toulouse-Lautrec, there's historically mostly French. And so the publisher is the person that pays for the production. And so we invite artists in. We only have room for about 3, maybe 4 artists a year because our calendar gets very full. We invite artists in, we pay for the full production. We actually market the work. We'll be in New York in a couple of weeks at the International Fine Print Dealers Association print fair. And as we sell the work, half of the funds will go back to the artist and half of the funds will go back to us for future projects so that we can pay everybody like Zach and myself and Onda and Josh to actually do the production. And then we can invite in other artists. That's kind of a nutshell.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth, again, reiterating that it's not reproductions.
No.
These people aren't approaching us and saying, I have this drawing, I want you to print it 50 times. It's much more collaborative.
Well, it's not only important that it's not a reproduction in the collaboration, but it's very important that all of these artists are spurred on and inspired by the fact that they go into their studio every day. And if they're doing the same thing that they did the day before, that becomes incredibly boring. That's not why they became an artist. They became an artist because sometimes there are either accidents or there are things that cause them to rethink. And it's that moment that you make a painting or you make a mistake or you make a move that shows you an avenue that you didn't know that morning. That when you walked in the studio, you didn't know that that was something that was in your future. And so it's really important when our artists come in that we give them the freedom to try things and experiment and find something that breathes new life into their practice. That's not a simple reproduction of something that they already had produced.
My quick question is, how do you decide the artist, or do they approach you, or do you approach them for the publishing? Are they artists you've been thinking about, like Willie Cole for a long time and trying to work with? How exactly do you decide, or are they kind of, is it just kind of serendipitous that you guys get to work together sometimes?
Sometimes serendipitous, but basically we research them and we're constantly looking. It seems any artist that we work with, we have to make sure that there's some marketability, because if we're going to make 30 impressions of something, we want to make sure that they go out in the world and live. That's not to say that we don't support artists that are not at that point in their career. We're going to support people that come in at Free Ink Day that don't even know that art is a career. We're going to have kids coming in and doing classes that maybe are beginning to understand art. And then we're going to support people that are making art while they've still got a full-time job and they're part of our co-op. We're going to support people that are in our residencies, but then the professional area is an arena where we throw in probably $30,000 or $40,000 worth of labor and materials into projects. And so we really kind of have to know that there's a good possibility of that those are going to go out and live. Why make 30 of something that's going to sit in a flat file? So those are artists that we research, that we talk to, we have studio visits, and sometimes, like Willie Cole, it takes 9 years for things to gel. We're working with artists right now in Jideka Akanyili, who's originally from Nigeria, and we've been working on her project for 3 years. So they're usually artists that we approach, that we scout, and we feel work within the program.
Yeah, that's great. And well, I'll just ask another question because I can't help myself. For your residencies, those what do those entail? Are those, you know, mid-career artists? Or those just people that want to get a little bit deeper into trying printmaking? And how do those usually run? Are they a year long? Are they a month long? You know, what do those look
Gosh.
like?
It's a mix of all of the above. We do have specifically a mid-career fellowship that's for artists with approximately 8 years of quote professional practice outside of any schooling. We have any early career printmakers residency, which is, you know, somewhere between 0 and 8 years of professional practice. The early career printmakers residency is 9 months long, and it coincides with the academic year. It was kind of designed as like a initially as a next step for somebody, for example, that's graduating from academic program, might take this as their next undertaking. The mid-career fellowship is 1 year long. Both of those opportunities have a culminating exhibition in our galleries that come with a stipend and many other things. And then along the lines of like somebody who may not have any printmaking experience whatsoever, we have a new program called the Full Color Print Program, which is a pilot program because it's still very much in its beta testing phase. And one aspect of that is what we term scholarship. So that's specifically for artists who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, who want to take who have no printmaking experience and would like to try it. They can do so free of charge. They just sign up and get to take any of our adult classes. And then the other side of that program is what we call the scholarship portion, and that's for artists who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color that do have like at least some modicum of printmaking experience, but may lack the access to a shop or other support, or simply might even not know Highpoint existed. So that's an application-based program. And we also, I guess the last program we have, which wasn't on the top of my radar because it's the only program that I don't personally administer, and that is our Access Print program for teen printmakers. It's kind of like a after school, twice a week thing where students can, they have to be, I think, sophomore to senior, and they can come in, they get trained and meet with a mentor and everything, and ultimately they get to have an exhibition as well.
Yeah, and Josh mentioned something about access. Printmaking studios traditionally are community spaces, and something that I know was a huge draw to me, probably to Josh, a lot of the people that use a studio, is you'll be working in a community space and you pull a print and there's somebody else there and they take a look at it and you get a little mini critique, or you see what they're doing and you share space. It would be like working in a ceramic studio where you share a kiln, where you share wheels. There's no sense that anyone would have to buy this equipment and have this space when it could be shared, because you only use it a certain number of hours a week. And that sense of belonging and support is really important.
That's really fantastic. Well, and that you're supporting all levels, all ages, all races. I mean, everyone is getting a chance to have access in this way.
Well,
that's
and personally, I didn't know an artist that was a professional when I grew up. I went to museums. So how do you get from being a kid taking art classes to a museum if you don't have those examples? And so we try and embrace all of those in the same space.
Absolutely. And having that chance to show your art for the first time in a gallery is an important step in that process of really understanding how do you even do that and calling yourself an artist even, you know, because it's you've figured it out almost, even if it's just one print on the wall when you're 14, it still is something that you're always going to keep with you in the process of becoming, hopefully one day, an artist for your life's work. Do we have any other questions from anyone else?
Yes, I have several questions. This is Jason. First, I commend you on your presentation. I think you want to take it on the road, so to speak. You're very clear in your goals, and I like the way you presented it. As somebody who's very interested in museums, as Adrian can tell you, so I was really impressed, and I learned more than I knew about printmaking. So I thank you for that. I have several questions related to the educational issues. The first question is, do you have any arrangement with a local university or college where students can take printmaking as part of a course? That is, they're taking printmaking or some related course, and this is part of it, so that they could come in for a certain amount of time and work with you. Secondly, for the high schools, which you mentioned after class, high schools have a lot of clubs. Do any local high schools have a printing club? So, for example, Iowa State has this group which does glass blowing, but it's sort of not exactly a club, but sort of like that. So do you have something like that? If not, maybe you could create it. And then the third thing relates to other nonprofits. I hope I'm not going too fast. So let's say somebody like Iowa State, they have a project. Do you work with other nonprofits? For example, Iowa State want to do some prints, something unusual. Do you work with other universities in that situation, or is that beyond what your scope? So those are my three questions.
I can take the first two. The second one I'll answer first because I can't remember the first one. It'll come to me. The second one, the print club part, I don't know of any high school print clubs. There are a couple of high schools with very engaged instructors in the area that I wouldn't be surprised if something like that does exist, but I don't know off the top of my head if they do in fact exist. However, they are quite popular at universities. Both the universities I went to had kind of grassroots DIY, what we called print clubs. I know that the University of Minnesota here has a print club called Bohemian Press. They have a little bit more support than a smaller university might have. Bohemian Press is actually able to like fund speakers and stuff like that to bring them and in some cases do workshops or even mini publications with the students. But they definitely do exist, in my experience, much more so on the university level than at the high school level. Part of the reason is, at least in my experience, printmaking generally isn't a huge part of high school art curriculum. I think my own high school experience, we did one lino cut that we printed by hand. It was like I think a one-day activity, and then that was it. So I don't know what's changed. That was many years ago that I was in high school, but you know, with the way funding structures are and things like that, I can't imagine most high schools are increasing their artistic programming and acquiring equipment to do prints if they didn't have it already. And I apologize, Jason, what was your first?
The first question was related to universities. Do you have any relationship with any local universities or colleges whereby printmaking may be part of a course related to the Arts Center that you work with them on that?
Could I take that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Generally, we do work with colleges and universities, but they are already supplying that. They are generally already supplying the classes, and we are actually the bridge that keeps those people from falling off the cliff. Those colleges and universities are already teaching lithography, screen printing, relief, intaglio. But what happens when they leave? And so we do adult classes. We do have the ability for students to come in and work from, well, we have a lot of interns. In fact, that's one really great aspect, is that the interns that come from colleges and universities get professional. I mean, they're getting paid. They're not paying to go to class. They are coming into Highpoint and they're getting paid to work. We're more the bridge. It's like, what happens when those people have concentrated in printmaking and now they've got student loans? What do they do when they graduate? That's where we are. That's really, so yes, we do work with colleges, and in a way we are justifying their teaching those because we are the next step. So no, we're not really working with colleges in teaching their students, but we are, it's not unusual that people make arrangements for tours. We have quite a few tours from local colleges where they bring in their students at the beginning of a semester to see the work that we're doing before they even start. And you know, the idea of high schools having clubs, unfortunately, there's not as many because they're not at the concentrated level, whereas the universities are, which Josh talked about, where there are clubs usually in colleges and universities because they've had enough experience that they're now defining themselves and they're concentrating themselves in that. And yes, we do work with them. And your other question, working with other nonprofits.
Right.
Yes, totally. We just published one of Julie Meritu's projects with the Walker Art Center. It's so important. I speak over and over. Nobody goes to Chelsea and New York because there's one gallery. It's because there's a multitude. And if we're not integrating in a fabric with the other nonprofits, and if we're not working with them, it wouldn't work. I mean, we're all supporting each other. So yes, we've got a lot of relationships with nonprofits, and it's something that we work on all the time.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Thanks, Jason. Any other questions before we kind of head out, because it's a little after 6:30 now, but no, well, thank you guys so much. This was really, I think, great for everyone to hear and to think about, and some of our students, and Raluca's clapping at you because she's our printmaker here on campus. And she has her own little studio and student innovation center now where we're trying to make it more accessible and open. So I always say it's trying to get there, but you know, it takes a lot of, like you said, a lot of work and a lot of space and a lot of effort, and you guys are doing a great job. So I really appreciate this, and hopefully we'll send some people up your way. I know next time I'm in Minneapolis, I'll try to make it.
Yeah, we love visitors. Welcome them all the time.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Please do. Please reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. And it'll be on YouTube if you need to watch it again.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.